of my job because I was about to talk about all these topics, but thank you very much. From the introduction, you also understand that I may be walking a little bit of thin ice here because I'm going to walk into corners of Jewish history which are still a little bit new to me. And the purpose of this presentation is actually to ask you for any possible inputs and interesting perhaps research materials, archival sources, or personal testimonies that could help the aim of this research project, which is to commemorate this important yet often overlooked personality of Leo Hermann. As it was already mentioned, Hermann was an alumni of the Prague student club. He himself was born in the town of Lanškroun, which is an interesting town lying on the historical border between Bohemia, Moravia, and Silesia. And at the same time, when he was born there, it was a almost 100% German-speaking town. So you can see that Hermann clearly had the chance to see and feel and to experience the possible ethnic tensions that appeared between the various communities. He was born into a family that had deep roots in Moravia, reaching back to as far as the 17th century to the village of Přestavlky in Přerov. And when mentioning the surname Hermann, of course, many of you will also remember the composer and chief editor of the Zionist journal Jüdische Rundschau, who was his cousin. This is the city of Lanškroun and its location. Interestingly enough, the name of Leo Hermann is not known there. And I have recently received a phone call from the district museum that they actually do not know that they had such an important personality born in their town, and they would like to do some kind of commemoration, perhaps an exhibition or something like that. Hermann studied law at the Charles University in Prague, and he joined the activities of the Bar student club in 1906. And for a short period of time, between 1908 and 1909, he also served as a chairman of the club. While this was a very short period of time, it is very important because it was Leo Hermann who invited Martin Buber to Prague, where Martin Buber later gave his famous Drei Reden über das Judentum. He was also editor-in-chief and contributor to multiple Zionist publications, be it Selbstwehr in Prague, or the Jüdische Volksstimme in Brno, or the Jüdische Zeitung in Vienna. He even succeeded his cousin Hugo Hermann at the post of chief editor of the Jüdische Rundschau, a Jewish review. And in 1919, he was appointed to the post of General Secretary of the World Zionist Organization. This is a very important moment for Hugo Bergmann, because he asked Hugo Bergmann to join him in London. And from there, Bergmann continued to Palestine. Hermann remained in London, in his London office. And while he has published multiple books, multiple works, it's not the books he is so important, he is so famous for. I hope I have marked him on the collective photograph of Barkovka Students Club correctly. Correct me if I'm mistaken. You will not find Hugo Bergmann there. Thank you. Hermann was, while he was also a thinker, he was primarily a political activist and manager. That's actually his superpower. His superpower is was the ability to find right people for the job, and he was very good at this. At 1920, as the Secretary General of the World Zionist Organization, he co-founded the Keren HaYesod, the foundation fund, and he became its secretary in 1926, and he remained in that position more or less for the rest of his life. At the same time, Hermann was active within the Brit Shalom, or Tahaluf al-Salam, or the Covenant of Peace in this peace movement, together with other German Jewish intellectuals, just like Hugo Bergmann and Martin Buber and Hans Kohn and Gershom Scholem and others. And in 1929, he was actually so much concerned about the escalation of the Zionist-Arab conflict in Palestine that he offered his resignation from the post of Keren HaYesod. Fortunately, he was convinced by his colleagues to not do this, and many lives were saved because of that, as we will see in a couple of minutes. In his career, he has met with many important personalities. So let us remember Marc Chagall or Martin Buber. And he was very much invested in propagation, in promotion, in propaganda of Zionism. And that's not only posters, that's also film industry. He has realized the power of this new medium, and he became production manager of two Zionist movies, one of which, The Land of Promise, the Chaim Chadashim in Hebrew, was the first Zionist movie with sound. The first Israeli sound movie was produced by Leo Hermann. It was directed by Yehuda Lehman. The movie was quite successful, actually. It was screened in large theaters around the world, from New York up to Nazi Germany, actually. But Nazi Germany is a little bit problematic because the Nazi regime was actually using it for its own purposes. But the screening in New York, for example, was a very successful event. Here we have a picture from the movie hall Astor in New York from 1935. Albert Einstein joined the screening as well. Do not worry, that's not Azaka. That's regular. Every first Wednesday, in the month, there is a silent test. So do not worry. In the meantime, the situation in Czechoslovakia for the Czechoslovak Jews was becoming worse, and Hermann closely followed the situation. We know that because now in the Central Zionist Archives you can find press clippings in his personal files with Keren HaYesod timestamps, which show that they were monitoring the situation closely. The situation of the Czechoslovak Jews became especially complicated after the Munich agreements in September 1938, and especially for the refugees, for the Jewish refugees from borderland areas, the so-called Sudetenland, who found themselves stranded on the border, on the no man's land between what now was Nazi Germany and what was left out of Czechoslovakia. Here the cartoon showing the Jewish refugee balancing on the border, asking, can I stay at least here? The Zionist press in Palestine focused on the situation very closely. They followed the situation very closely. We are talking about 2,500 articles being published about Czechoslovakia or somehow mentioning Czechoslovakia during the time span of about 6 months since the Munich conference to the beginning of the Nazi occupation. And Hermann himself visited Czechoslovakia in October 1938, shortly after the Munich conference, and he saw the situation of the Jewish refugees, as well as the worsening of the political system in Czechoslovakia. And already before the Munich conference, he was thinking about designing a scheme similar to the German HABA, the transfer agreement for the German Jews. He was thinking about something similar for the Czechoslovak Jews. And after Munich, he decided to intensify his efforts in this respect. He used his powers to bring together skilled people and started lobbying with Zionist representatives as well as Czechoslovak government, Czechoslovak National Bank, and most importantly the British National Bank and the British administration, to divert a portion of the Munich loan, the loan that was offered by Great Britain to Czechoslovakia as a kind of compensation for the damages caused by the Munich agreement. So about 500,000 pounds sterling were about to be diverted and used to be bought by the Czechoslovak Jews for Czech crowns. These Jews would be then able to fulfill the necessity of having 1,000 pounds of wealth that would allow them to receive the so-called capitalist certificate, which would allow them to immigrate to Palestine. That was the plan. The deal was finalized already with the Czechoslovak government in January 1939. Several trains were dispatched full of Zionist and Jewish refugees, from which the second train is very important, because it's that second train which departed on March 14th and crossed the border from Czechoslovakia to Poland on March 15th, just 5 minutes before the Germans closed the border. That's the train which evacuated Max Brod and Felix Welch. Without Leo Hermann, who knows how this conference would look like. The frantic efforts continued even after the occupation. This was a huge problem because Czechoslovakia ceased to exist. Suddenly it was an enemy territory, so they had to establish an independent entity called Czechoslovak Refugee Trust, through which the money was sent, and this allowed them to continue these efforts several months even after the Nazi occupation began, even despite the fact that they had to deal with Gestapo and with protectorate authorities. They managed to evacuate a couple of hundreds more people out of the country. In total, this transfer agreement saved about 2,500 Jewish lives. And its realization also set the ground for future evacuation initiatives, including the famous Vinton train. or the post-war Bricha. Max Brod arrived to Palestine safely about 1 week later. He gave an interview to the VA, to the labor Zionist newspaper, in which he describes the very stressful journey. Hermann was not alone in this, of course, because he was the organizer behind the curtains, working from London. There are many more people whose names need to be mentioned when talking about this transfer agreement. Be it the Zionist representatives such as Yitzhak Greenbaum, or on the Czechoslovak side, Josef Kaufus, Petr Zenkel, or the representative of the British National Bank, Robert Stopford, and most importantly, very important woman in all this, Maria Shmolkova. Maria Shmolkova is one of the heroes of this entire endeavor. She was a head of the social care department of the Jewish community, and it was she who was forced to deal with most of the bureaucratic obstacles that were required to evacuate Jews from the country, especially during the Protectorate. They had to rent an entire building just for this purpose. They had to establish an entire telephone central, basically call center, just to deal with all the bureaucracy. Maria Shmolkova, she later died in 1940, so she did not see the end of the war. She also later cooperated with Nicholas Winter, a very important personality. I think there could be an entire conference dedicated just to her, and there would be plenty of material. When the war ended, Leo Hermann visited Prague about 4 months after the liberation, and his notes and diaries from that time are not an easy reading. He describes the city absent of Jews. He describes this empty void that was left behind by the Nazi genocide. He describes walking around the streets and seeing no Jewish faces. And while he sees some Ukrainian Jewish, Polish and Russian Jewish refugees, in his eyes, because these are the Eastern Jews, in his eyes, this actually makes matters worse. This actually highlights the loss even worse, because the Jewish population of the city has disappeared, and suddenly there are these new people, these new faces, this new culture, which he saw had little connection to this place. And when he visited the town of Lanškroun, his birthplace, he also noted the absence of German elements and the fact that German became forbidden language. So his last contacts and visits to Czechoslovakia are not exactly nice encounters. He managed to meet with Jan Masaryk. He attempted to re-establish some of the Zionist institutions, but then the communist putsch of 1948 comes, and many of these activities are again strangled. In Israel, he continued as the chairman of Keren HaYesod, assisting integration of Jewish refugees after the War of Independence, and he died shortly thereafter at the 10th of September 1951. He was quite young, died in the age of 63, and by coincidence, his 70th yahrzeit was just a couple of weeks ago. His death was announced by the leading Zionist dailies, who also mentioned his role in the transfer agreement, which is very interesting because at that time, to talk about ha'avara, to talk about these transfer agreements, to talk about buying German goods to get the Jews out of the country, the society was not ready for it yet, and it was very sternly documented by or manifested by the Kastner trial, which began in 1954, at about the same time when this book was published. This is a memorial book published in 1954 in the name of Leo Hermann. It was edited by Felix Welch, and the book contains one entire chapter describing the transfer agreement, which I think that at the time was quite brave, given the political atmosphere in Israel vis-à-vis these kinds of rescue efforts, and also Hugo Bergmann has there one chapter which is meant to be something like a necrologue for Leo Hermann. There, Hugo Bergmann notes that the life of his friend was kind of tragic, quite tragic, because he felt that Leo Hermann was made for much greater things, and that he was not allowed to actually realize them, that he was not given the chance to achieve the Hakshama, the fulfillment. That was this very strong topic in the thought of Hugo Bergmann. He wrote that the spirit of Leo Hermann was much larger than the fate it was given to it. The political context, the historical context, simply in Hugo Bergmann's opinion, has not allowed to achieve this Hakshama. He mentions other reasons, not only the certain humbleness of Leo Hermann, who never actually achieved for public political position. He always remains behind the curtains, like this fixer, like this organizer, like secretary. But at the same time, he also mentioned some of the practical problems. For example, Leo Hermann, while he learned Hebrew, he never achieved the level of fluency that would allow him to speak publicly and to run for public office. Leo Hermann died about 70 years ago, almost exactly. I think the Kaddish in his name should be recited not by one, but by two nations, the Czech and the Israeli. This is my presentation for today. Thank you very much for your attention. As I said, I am working a little bit of thin ice. This is a research project in a very early stage. And why I came here to ask you if you have any interesting sources or materials or testimonies that could be interesting for documentation and perhaps commemoration of Leo Hermann, especially, for example, for the purpose of his commemoration in his hometown. I would be very much interested in hearing that or getting in contact with you. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm finished. Thanks.